Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. My name is Jeff Allen, and this evening we're going over Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, specifically the section on the awakening mind, Bodhicitta, Mahayana mind generation. And such a wonderful time to be able to speak about this because it's the only thing that will allow us to become Buddhas. And when we look at all the troubles and all the heartache in the world and all the sufferings that are going on, the only way that we can really help is to become Buddhas. And then we can help each and every individual sentient being with whatever their suffering is, whatever their needs are, to be able to achieve a freedom from suffering altogether, a fearlessness and a freedom from all states of suffering, and a limitless state of happiness that all sentient beings can achieve if we become Buddhas in dependence upon what we show them and what we teach them, because we'll know exactly what they need. So what a wonderful time when the world is experiencing so many troubles for us to be thinking about a way to cure all of it. That's something that we really have to focus on, that if we want the world to become a better place, that we are part of that world, this world. And if we become better, the world becomes better. If we as a group of Rinpoche's students become better and better and better, the world becomes that many times better, and than it was before. So we can contribute in the meantime, before we're Buddhas, to the goodness of the world by practicing these teachings. What will naturally manifest is that we'll be more affectionate and loving and compassionate towards all beings around us. And in the long run, by practicing these things, we'll be able to free them from every type of suffering they could ever experience, and put an end to that cycle of suffering for them by showing them a perfect path that we ourselves went through and achieved the state of Buddhahood by engaging in. So such a fortunate evening we have here to talk about bodhicitta. So without further ado, let's get into a posture that's intentional. The 7-point Vairakana posture is the one that we've been focusing on. And one point that you find in the Lam Rim texts, and mostly any time you see advices on meditation, is if you can, under your seat, put it up just a little bit higher than your legs, it'll allow you, it'll help with the posture. So sometimes when you sit in a flat seat, you can sink backwards. But if you have your butt raised a little bit, it allows for you to sit in the posture a little bit easier. So I wanted to mention that. So the 7-point Vairakana posture, we put our legs into whatever we can do. Vajra posture is best. Recently, Geshe Dorje Damdu said that, if it's something that we can't do, then it won't make our mind lax if we don't sit that way. But if it's something we can achieve, we should really try to achieve it. So when we're talking about sitting in the Vajra posture, if it's something that we're just not stretched out enough to do and we haven't practiced enough to do, it's something that we can practice doing by putting our legs halfway into the posture, or getting it, if we can, fully into the posture, leaving it there for however long we can until it's unbearable, not letting the pain get too high, but letting, and then putting our leg back down. And then once there's enough relief, then we'd be able to get into that posture again, and to practice it over and over and over again. Because he said that if it's something that we can get into, it makes for more of a clarity of our mind when we're meditating. And if it's something that we can't get into, it won't be an obstacle. It won't cause our mind not to be clear, because it's something that we can't physically get into. But if we can physically get into it and we have the capacity to move in that direction, it will allow for more clarity. So I just wanted to put that point out there because that is a point that's raised. And it's something that we can practice, but not become obsessed with it. And again, if it's something that we can't do, then we do whatever we can in this physical posture. So we, put one leg in the half lotus posture, just cross-legged, or sitting with our feet on the floor. There's no fault whatsoever if it's something that we can't physically do. So we put our legs into the posture that we can based on that explanation just given. Put our hands on top of one another with our right on top of our left with our thumbs touching, making a diamond and putting them in our lap comfortably, making our back straight like a stack of coins, it's said, and our shoulders in a comfortable position, body relaxed, not too clenched, but not so loose. So we have the back like a stack of coins and our arms bowed. So now we then slightly tilt the head forward, not forward like this, but we want to make sure it's not back. So we slightly tilt it forward with our eyes slightly open, focused towards the tip of our nose at a 45-degree angle. And then we put our tongue on the roof of our mouth that allows for the saliva to circulate. And then we breathe through our nose. So usually when we do this meditation over the last few sessions, we've focused solely on the breath and the counting. So tonight we're going to add a slight step to that so that we can try to move closer to a calm abiding, to a single pointed concentration, and use an object of observation that's a little more advanced than we were doing. And then by doing so, we can kind of gain virtue and focus in a little bit more. So why don't I just explain what I mean? So we're going to focus on the breath. So we're going to, in this 7-point Vairocana posture with our legs, our hands, our back, our shoulders, our head slightly down, eyes slightly open, 45 degrees pointed towards the nose and our tongue on the top of the roof. We're going to begin to breathe in and out and focus on the breath. So we're going to use that breath as a focal point, as a place to try to get into a more neutral mental state. So we're going to focus on the breath, and we're not using our eye consciousness. Even though we're saying we're focused with our eyes on the tip of the nose, meditation is meant to be done with the mental consciousness. So we're eventually, once we're really, really skilled at meditation, we're going to be able to shut that physical consciousness off, that eye consciousness or ear consciousness or nose consciousness, whatever those things are that are kind of physical consciousnesses. And we'll use solely the mental consciousness, and that is what we'll observe things with. So meditation, we have analytical meditation, and we have single-pointed meditation. So we're, in this case, going to try to do a single-pointed meditation where we're focusing on the breath. And then in the space in front of us, about 2 feet in front of us, at about eye level, while we're focusing on this breath. It's good that we can do these 2 things at once. As we get more and more advanced into meditation practice, there's going to be a lot of things going on when we're doing mantra recitation. So it's good that if we can, try to, in this particular case, we're going to use the breath to try to calm it down. And then we're going to try to get to that one focal object, which will be in Buddha Shakyamuni. And we'll try to imagine it in the space in front of us, about this big, or whatever size it comes to us. If you use other front objects of meditation, other deities, feel free to use that deity. But most of the instructions say to use Buddha Shakyamuni, because Buddha Shakyamuni is the greatest, has achieved the level of greatest being. So when we use this object of observation, then we're gaining merit as well as developing a skill set. So this is the reason it's said to use a Buddha. So we're going to, in the space in front of us, very, very clear. We're not going to try to get obsessed with the details, but just a very, very clear and full of light. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni in a very small form in the space in front of you while you're doing the breathing. And focus only on Buddha Shakyamuni. We're not going to get into details about Buddha or details about the meditation. Just keep it very, very basic. So breathing in and breathing out and focusing with your mind on Buddha Shakyamuni. And anytime your mind wavers and tries to get to another object, tries to escape the object of observation or forgets it, rein it back in and bring it back to Buddha Shakyamuni. So focus on the breath for a moment, just to try to kind of calm down And then at the same time as you're breathing and focusing on that in and out, focus on this image of Buddha Shakyamuni. So we'll get started with that. We'll do that for a minute or so. Okay, now that we've gotten our mind to a more reasonable place and accumulated a little merit, let's start to think about the various sufferings of cyclic existence. Think about the general and specific sufferings that we have to endure, sufferings that we read about. Think about the suffering of birth, aging, and be very specific when we think about how these things affect us. Sickness, death, losing loved ones. Think about all the times we've had to separate from things that we want, things that are pleasant. All the unpleasant things that we've had to meet with and have to meet with. All the things that we thought would make us happy end up turning into something else. We'll have to die because of beginningless lives and all of the future lives, the endless consciousness that we have. If we haven't gotten rid of the causes for all of these sufferings, we'll have to experience them again and we'll be forced into another rebirth. Every moment we're headed towards another cycle of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Meeting with the unpleasant, being separated from the pleasant, and not getting what we want over and over again. And then dying and being thrust into another set of aggregates. We start to look at what the reason why we have to experience this is. And we find that the Buddha stated in the second noble truth that the cause of all of these sufferings was ignorance. And then the Buddha gave us the good news that it could all end if we relied on a path that superior beings realized. And it gives us some hope that we don't have to suffer, that there is a way that we could end all of our suffering, the suffering, the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. We could no longer have to be scared, no longer have to be fearful fearful of cyclic existence, that fear that caused us to go for refuge to the Buddha, would no longer be there, and we would be able to transcend that altogether. And we were told that by the Buddha, and that we could even achieve his or her state. And we start to think about other sentient beings that we love and care about, strangers that we see. We think about them having to endure the various types of suffering. We think of beings that we consider enemies or those that we just don't like. And we remember their kindness in previous lives. And we recognize that it's very possible that those beings will be our best friends if circumstances change. And we've seen this many times in our lives, that these relationships don't have the solid nature that they seem to at the time when we cling to them so dearly. And we think about those beings that were so kind to us in previous lives that we now label as enemy. And we take that label off and we try to wish for them to have that same kind of freedom that we yearn for. Because we recognize that our friends, enemies, and neutrals all, just like ourselves, want to be happy, want to be free from suffering. Their intensity of pain is no less important than my intensity of pain. We start to think how nice it would be if sentient beings, all of them, could have happiness and the causes of happiness and be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And we start to think that we want to be the cause of that and have to recognize that we can't at this point in time because of our own handicap, because we are in cyclic existence. And we're unable to help because we are not free. We can't take someone somewhere we haven't been. We don't know how to thoroughly help them. So in order to achieve the goal of being a cause for sentient beings' happiness and freedom from suffering, I have to become a Buddha. And in order to become a Buddha, I have to engage in a path. In order to engage in a path, I have to hear about the path. I have to accumulate merit. I have to understand the meaning. So it's for that reason that I'm here this evening, listening to the teaching on bodhicitta, understanding that bodhicitta is the only entrance into the Mahayana. The only way I can become a Buddha is to get the mind that aspires to enlightenment, aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. The only way I can practice the pathways mentioned in the Heart Sutra, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha, the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, the path of no more learning, is by first generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment, which is the entrance into the path of accumulation. Entrance into Gate, the first Gate. So we recognize this. And as we chant the Heart Sutra, we should think that we're doing so for the sake of all sentient beings, in order to become a Buddha for their sake. This is why we're chanting the Heart Sutra. This is why we're looking at the implicit and explicit meaning of the Heart Sutra. This is why we're making all of the prayers and mandala offerings and going for refuge with the Bodhicitta prayer inside of it. And as we analyze the meaning and say these holy prayers, let us do so for the sake of all sentient beings, so that we may become Buddhas for their sake. And it's for that reason that we're doing what we're doing. That's why we're listening to this. It's why we'll analyze it and meditate it, so that we meditate on it, so that we can transform ourselves into holy beings like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like Khensur Geshe Wangdak, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, like Geshe Dorji Damdu, like Geshe Aga, like Geshe Lobsang Gonpo, et cetera, et cetera. So with that being said, let's set our motivation to do these prayers and think about their meaning, so that we may become Buddhas for the sake of all. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as truth. Since there is no deception, the Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Buddhi Soha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jebe ne jodamba ne ngoshe de jenga idu do jendru baba lama yibu jinzi ne zongandro zola jaze lo gazamara de zanara zamana be gazamara. Agazamara Jashanara Samara Yambe, Dia Dong, Gatikati Baragati Barasangati Buddhizo. Baba Gonjo Sonji Gai, Dimbi Doji, Loba Doji, Mebo Doji, Shewa Doji, Dragi Baji Medin Beshudanji, Shedin Goyezo, Gerin Janjaji, Shewa Dam, Medun Nebejenda Dewa. Dumba Junjin Bonzon Zonjoji, Daji Dejan Denda Delejo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. Ro Nye zo lama dhamma nina nye ye ye ga la yin yun ye ye da za me do ye ze ma la za nye ye ye ya va do zo. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Radha Mandala Gam Niradayami Zanye Jadan Jye Janam La Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jinye Jibezananji Trala Benji Zanje Druba Jo Zanye Jadan Jye Janan La Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jinye Jibezananji Trala Benji Zanje Druba Jo Zanye Jadan Jye Janan La Janju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jinye Jibezananji Trala Benji Zanje Druba Jo. The one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher Sugata and protector, to you I make prostrations. The one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays, to you, Buddha, I make prostrations. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind of full awakening for the benefit of sentient beings. May this language be heard and understood. May this teaching be heard and understood in the language of all sentient beings. Okay. So welcome, everyone. So good to see all of you. Sorry about the distractions during the meditation. The dogs decided to go absolutely crazy while I was trying to do the guided meditation and do the single pointed meditation. So I apologize for any distraction that took place during that period of time. I hope everybody was able to set a good motivation for the teaching, even though the dogs were doing what they were doing. We're going to have all kinds of distractions in life. And it's how we react to them, and it's what we can, do with them that will make or break us in terms of our reactions. So when we encounter something that's difficult, sometimes we have to see if we can have the patience to be able to work through it. So sometimes, situations like, the dog being so distracting, the dog is our greatest teacher, because it shows us that our mind is so easily taken off balance by just the slightest noise, and our patience can be taken off balance by just the slightest little rub that isn't allowing us to get things the way that we want them, or have them occur the way that we want them. So it's good for us to sometimes encounter things like distractions to see how our mind is really working. So with that being said, once again, we're looking at Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. Such a fortunate evening because this text is so beautiful, and it's the text that they begin using to study the Prajnaparamita and Drepung Loseling, Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. And this section is so inclusive that it's wonderful. So let's get started with the outline, and it's always good to start with the outline. So we began with a basis. What kind of basis would one need to get aspiring bodhicitta, to get engaged bodhicitta? So we learned all about that, the kind of mental basis necessary, the physical basis necessary. So we went over that. Anyone who hasn't can very easily go back to the first Bodhicitta teaching and the second Bodhicitta teaching. They're all on YouTube. And it contains all of the points about the mental and physical basis for achieving the mind that aspires to enlightenment. In the second section, we have causes, general causes, and then specific causes. We went over the general causes, conditions, and powers. So we went over that extensively. And now we're at the section on specific root causes. So after that, we'll get into nature and divisions and the actual benefits of the mind that aspires to enlightenment. But we're still in that second section of you know, a little ways into the second section of causes, the specific root causes. And we learn that there's two specific root causes for getting the mind that aspires to enlightenment: equalizing, exchanging self with others, passed down from the profound view lineage, and the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, passed down from the extensive deeds lineage. So the equalizing, exchanging self with others, passed down from the profound view lineage, from Buddha Shakyamuni to from Madjushri to Arya Nagarjuna, Shantideva, eventually to Lama Salimpa, and then to Lord Atisha. So we find that lineage, the equalizing, exchanging self with others. And then the 7-point cause and effect lineage we find in the extensive deeds lineage. And that was passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya, to a Sangha, and then eventually through various masters to Lama Salimpa, and then to Lord Atisha. So we see Lord Atisha as a holder of both of these lineages of instruction, the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, and then the 7-point cause and effect practice for achieving the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And in the Lam Rim teachings, we'll find a way to actually combine these two. But we first have to learn each one of them in a very complete way before we talk about trying to confuse ourselves with combining them. So if we learn each of these lineage systems in a very complete way, then it's so simple to combine them and see how the two of them work with one another. But let's get through each of them individually, and then afterwards we'll look at how we can combine the two of them. So we previously have been focused on the 7-point cause and effect instruction for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, passed down from the extensive deeds lineage, right? From Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Asanga to Lama Salimpa, and then to Atisha. And we talked about Atisha going to see Lama Salimpa in Indonesia, and just because he wanted to go learn bodhicitta, he wanted to learn the real instructions for getting the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And he took a 13-month boat ride. It was so difficult because he knew that this instruction was the heart of the Mahayana. He knew that Chandrakirti paid homage to this actual type of mind, to compassion. At the very beginning, and he knew why, because it was compassion that caused bodhicitta, the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and everything was a cause of compassion or caused by compassion, and he wanted these core instructions. So he went to Indonesia, got to Indonesia, and as we talked about in the Lam Rim class on Sundays, because of how we know you have to examine a teacher. Atisha first, even though this teacher was so famous and was, you know, throughout the world, the highest master of understanding bodhicitta, Atisha went around and asked these students, you know, questions about Master Salimpa to say, is he really who everyone says he is? And when he found out that he was, he spent all this time, all these years with him to learn bodhicitta, and considered him, even though he didn't hold as high of a view on emptiness as Lord Atisha, he considered him his heart Lama, his main Lama, because of giving him the instructions on bodhicitta. And what instructions were those? The 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and equalizing, exchanging yourself with others. So we're focused on the 7-point cause and effect right now. So we've gone over it pretty extensively up to love through the force of attraction. So we see that when we're starting to get into this meditation, we first have to have the foundation if we're actually going to realize these things. If we're not just trying to make imprints and familiarize ourselves with it, we're actually trying to realize at the end of this process, the mind that aspires to enlightenment, which obviously would be the reason we're doing it, there are all the precepts of the Lam Rim that are necessary. When you look at the very, very end of the Lam Rim Chemo, and then you look at all the steps when it summarizes it, and then you look at this section on how we develop compassion and how we develop this love and so forth, we'll see that there's so many references made over and over and over again to the need for us to first understand the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity that drive us to want to get out of the lower realms of cyclic existence and how we would do so. And we have to understand the teachings shared in common with beings of medium capacity, which show us how all of cyclic existence is downfalls and show us how we could then get out of cyclic existence. And we have to get a desire to emerge first from the lower realms in the small scope, and then from cyclic existence altogether in the medium scope. And it's from that desire to emerge, it's from that understanding of suffering, the origin of suffering and so forth, that we learn in the medium scope at the Four Noble Truths, that allows us from this desire to definitely emerge for ourselves wanting to get out of suffering, to turn that towards others and wanting to get them out of suffering. But it's first this realization from our own side of suffering, causes of suffering and so forth, that make it firm in our minds enough to want to free others from their suffering. So even though we're starting at this step of equanimity, and we say this is the pre-step, the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity are the precept before the pre-step. So it's so important for us to understand that. And once we get into the meditation on great compassion, we'll see how important these earlier meditations are. So we went through this developing equanimity, this developing impartiality towards our friends, enemies, and neutrals. And we see in that instruction, it says that we start with our neutrals because we don't have any sort of reaction of attachment or aversion to them. And we start to try to get equanimity, kind of an equal desire to be helpful, or a willingness to be helpful, an open mind and willingness towards each one of these beings equally to be of help, of benefit. So we would be willing equally to do that for all of them. And then we move on to our friends, and we'll see a very different reaction that takes place that kind of separates these two types of beings. When we see how we first reacted towards our neutrals and trying to bring that to a place of, being willing to be of benefit to them, being open to this idea, being open to that being. And then we look at the way we react to our friends, and this attachments takes place. And we have to turn that down a little bit, because we would, if that's in place and we don't have the equanimity, we'd be more likely to help them than we would someone who's a stranger. So we have to right size that relationship in our meditation and bring it to a place of equal, that's equal to that of a stranger. And then we move on to our enemies, and that's where it gets very, very difficult. And we have to try to stabilize that feeling by starting to meditate on beginningless lives and starting to understand that all of our friends have been our enemies and all of our enemies have been our friends, and understanding that there's no solid enemy, there's no solid friend. And we can meditate in this way to try to lessen each of our reactions to our friends and our enemies when we start to use these meditations as antidotes to our clinging, to see how it's not rational, because everyone's been our best friend, that stranger's been your best friend, that best friend's been your enemy, and that enemy's been your best friend. And every single one of those three beings could become any one of those three beings, even in this lifetime. A stranger could become your best friend, a stranger could become your enemy, your friend could become your enemy. I don't know, they can become a stranger once they're, right, a friend, but I think you get the point. And an enemy can become a friend. And when we look at, what stranger kind of is, it's just somebody that we just kind of shuck off, that we're not paying attention to, that we don't have attachment to, that we don't have aversion to. So we're not really focusing on them. So now we're trying to get everybody to this place where we're equally willing to focus on all those three types of beings without any kind of push or pull one way or another. So we're equally willing to help all of those sorts of beings. So we get to that place by meditating on equanimity and impartiality. And the reason that we do that is so that we can set it up for the first 3 causes of the 6 causes within the 7-point cause and effect that make bodhicitta happen. And the reason I'm saying the first 3 is because there's 2 categories within the 6. So when we look at the 7-point cause and effect, there's the first 3 that allow us to generate affection for all sentient beings. And then the next 3 make us have a mind intent on being helpful to those beings. And then by combining the first 3 and then the next 3, so they, it goes one, they go in that order, we can then have the arisal of the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So it's necessary to produce these 6 causes for the 7th result to take place. So we said that the first among the 3 causes for developing affection for sentient beings was recognizing all sentient beings are our mother. And we said that we recognize all sentient beings have been our brother, have been our sister, have been our wife, have been every relationship close that we can think of. And every relationship where we were vulnerable and were aided, and we really, really needed that other sentient being. We've had those experiences and those relationships with every single sentient being. And we start with this relationship of our mother because we know that when we were born, we were in one of our most vulnerable states we could possibly be. And no one really in the world knew us but our parents. And they were willing to do so many things in order for us to be okay. They didn't know us. They didn't have, we didn't do anything specifically wonderful for them, but they were so willing to do all of the things for us that were needed for us to survive. Our mother was willing to carry us in her womb for 9 months and undergo an enormous amount of suffering and discomfort for us. And then afterwards, we were taken care of by our parents and our mother. So we start with this idea of mother, and we should start with it in our minds like we're a child that's vulnerable. We shouldn't be looking at it like maybe a later relationships because we're not as vulnerable, and it doesn't invoke that same kind of quality of understanding of how kind other beings have been to us when they didn't, have any, driving reason that we did anything so great for them. They, out of altruism, out of desire to be helpful for us, took care of our needs when we were so vulnerable. So we start recognizing that every sentient being has had this relationship with us. And as we went through it before, we see that we start with our friends, and then we go to our neutrals, and then we go to our enemies. And we try to see how we've done with this equanimity meditation. So we're constantly going through these different stages of cause and effect, if you will, or these different stages that will result in bodhicitta. And we're checking the whole time. We're using the mirror of the Dharma to see if we're having these realizations and if they're stable or not. So we do this equanimity meditation, and we say now we're equally open, right, to seeing that all sentient beings were equally open to benefit, equally open to all these 3 types of beings. And then we see that our friends, enemies, and neutrals have all been our mothers. We see if there's still any kind of reaction in our mind when we go through these different types of beings, when we're trying to have this relationship with them, that we see them all as having been our mothers. So we do it in that fashion. And it says in the Lam Rim, in Pabunka Rinpoche's Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, that once we achieve this real realization, we will walk up to an ant and say, I'm your son. You are my kind mother. And you'll really believe that spontaneously without having to do any analysis. It'll just naturally come. So the next step in this meditation is remembering their kindness. So you're remembering the kindness of our mothers. remembering the kindness of sentient beings. And we're going through the various memories of how kind they were to us when we were born, carrying us in the womb, feeding us, various different types of kindness that sentient beings have shown us. And we remember their kindness in all of those different ways. And we do this in relation to friends, and then neutrals, and then enemies again. And we're checking it again. So we're seeing that all sentient beings are our mother. Now we're remembering their kindness. We're thinking about the kindness of all of them, kindness that our friends have shown us, kindness that our enemies and neutrals, and then enemies have shown us. Then the next step is wishing to repay their kindness. So now this is just a wish. So there isn't an actual action step that's taking place here. Now you're saying, oh, all these sentient beings who are my mother have been so kind to me. I wish I could repay their kindness. How could I repay their kindness? If I gave them some temporary happiness, could this repay their kindness to me? If I knew that this temporary happiness that I gave them was actually because it was in samsara, a form of suffering? If I give them some kind of cause for happiness that isn't a cause for liberation or Buddhahood, am I helping them truly? And so we start to recognize that the way to truly repay the kindness of beings was if we could somehow make it so they could really, really be happy. Somehow do that. So then we get from that point, we're then moving on to what's called love through the force of attraction. And that's where we left off last week. So these 3 steps are actually causing the next 3. So you're developing this intense affection for sentient beings so that then you have this equal intense affection for sentient beings that doesn't have any kind of bias. And then you start to work on, may they have happiness and the causes of happiness. So through this attraction you have for them, because you have affection for them, you see them as loving, as lovable, a lot of lamas say. So you see these sentient beings as lovable because you have affection for them. So you've developed this affection through these stages so that they are seen as lovable, so you want them to have happiness and the causes of happiness. So all of these things are very, very necessary to do in order if you want to have the real realizations of these things. Like it says in Kamalashila's text, if you're just doing this in general ways and you're thinking of sentient beings in general ways, and you're not getting very, very specific in your meditations with friends, enemies, and neutrals, right? And these neutrals, you see them, you know who they are, right? So you say, okay, friends, I know who they are. Enemies, I definitely know who they are. And who are these neutrals? Who are these strangers? They can be people that you see in the supermarket, people that are in your neighborhood, people that are in the hardware store, that are neutral to you, but you see them going by. I was saying on the Lam Rim teaching, then you see them going by and just make a note of them, and then you can add them to your meditation. You can add more sentient beings that you actually can think of to your meditation and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And in the Lam Rim teachings, it talks about this, friends, enemies, neutrals, when you're doing a meditation and you have sentient beings all around you, it says, or you're taking on suffering and giving happiness, whatever meditation you're doing, it says you think about this, friends and neutrals and then enemies, and then everyone else, right? So, at some point you're going to have to think about beings that you don't know of, right? Maybe beings in hell realms, hungry ghost realms. But you certainly can add them by, after you've gotten through beings that you can actually think of, thinking about the various states those beings are in and trying to relate to what it would be like for them, right? So you're just trying to bring more and more beings into the realm of your love and compassion when you're doing this meditation, and you're trying to do it in a real, tangible way that causes your mind to change in relation to your environment and the whole world of sentient beings eventually. So this love through the force of attraction comes through these three stages of affection. And you say, first, when you look at what is the object of this love through the force of attraction, it's sentient beings who don't have happiness. So you're wondering what is my object of observation for this love through the force of attraction? It's all sentient beings that don't have happiness in some way. So that's the object of the actual love through the force of attraction. And then the actual subjective aspect, the subject is thinking, the mental consciousness is thinking. I will, how nice it would be for first. So you first building, it's very interesting. So this love isn't just love. It's built up in strength through the meditations. And you may have seen this meditation in the Four Immeasurables before, but you also find it in the Lam Rim Chemo in relation to love. So you're building up the strength of your love as you meditate on love. So you're saying, so the object of observation is sentient beings that don't have happiness. The thought is, how nice it would be if sentient beings could have happiness. May my friends, neutrals, and enemies have happiness. May they have happiness. I'm sorry. So how nice it would be if my friends, enemies, and friends, neutrals, and enemies have happiness. So that's the first level. How nice it would be, right? How nice it would be if my friends, neutrals, and enemies had happiness. Then the next level of this love is, may they. Okay, may they. How nice it would be if they could just have this happiness. And then you say, may they have this happiness. So may my friends, neutrals, and enemies have happiness and the causes of happiness, right? So how nice it would be if they had happiness and the causes of happiness. How nice, may they have happiness and the causes of happiness. And then the third level is, may I be a cause for my friends, neutrals, and enemies to be happy, to have happiness. So here it's still this aspiration. So I was speaking with Geshe Aga today, and I was saying, what's the difference between, it seems like there's a lot of points during this 7-point cause and effect that are very similar to the extraordinary attitude, right? That extraordinary attitude we'll get to that says, I'll take on the task of freeing them all. It seems like there's a little of it in the third step for gaining that affection, where it is wishing to repay the kindness. But here, this is just wishing, right? And here, this next thing is may I be a cause. I will cause them to be happy. I'll cause them. So still, it's more of an aspiration. It's strong. It's what will eventually turn into that extraordinary attitude. But at this point, it's saying, I will cause them to be happy. So you're building up this kind of mind of love, stronger and stronger and stronger, saying how nice it would be if they were happy. May they be happy. I will cause them to be happy. So these are the levels of love that you're meditating upon. And again, you're doing this for your friends, neutrals, and enemies. So you're cultivating this love. And it says the stages of cultivating, it is just as mentioned. You first start with your friends, then you cultivate it towards those who you have neutral feelings for, and then cultivate it towards all for whom you have enemies, and then cultivate it towards all living beings. So it says first friends, then neutrals, then enemies, then all living beings. Those all living beings are those extra ones that you can't place, right? They aren't friends, they aren't neutrals, they aren't enemies. They're these extra beings that you don't know. because your mind isn't sharp enough to be able to observe more than this little bit of realm we see and the animals and so forth that we can see. But our mind's very limited in our level of our level and ability to observe sentient beings. So as we get higher and higher on the stages of the path, our mind will have more of an ability to observe more sentient beings and add more of them to our actual objects of observation of love, which are all living beings. Eventually, every single one of them that are bereft of happiness, and saying, you know, how nice it would be if they have happiness. May they have happiness. I'll be the cause of that happiness. So the way you cultivate it is, it's saying here that once you've repeatedly thought about how living beings are miserable by suffering, then so here it's not showing this direct cause and effect, right? It's showing how these two, love and compassion, kind of work together. 7-point cause and effect is in a specific order, but Lama Tsongkhapa specifically says here, and this is an important point, just as you can develop compassion once you have repeatedly thought about how living beings are made miserable by suffering, develop love by repeatedly thinking about how beings lack happiness. So this is a little bit different when you understand what the point that's being made here. Here, it's just talking about happiness specifically, that happiness that a being has. It's not looking at a specific suffering, but you obviously are thinking about beings that aren't happy, and beings that aren't happy are suffering. So when we're thinking about, you know, wanting beings to have happiness, we're thinking about beings who don't have happiness. So we do see that connection there, but this is a separate kind of motivation that we have, and it isn't looking at these various types of suffering in the way that compassion is. So we're thinking about how beings lack happiness, and we're thinking about how they don't even have all of the contaminated happinesses that they want, let alone the uncontaminated happinesses. And then we become familiar with this, and we naturally start to wish for them to be happy. And then we imagine that our mind gives them various forms of happiness, both mundane but mostly the super mundane, the uncontaminated forms of happiness, that eternal happiness, the bliss that comes from Buddhahood. That's the happiness that we're ultimately wanting to give these sentient beings. But we also want them to be comfortable along the way, right? We'd like them to, you know, have a roof over their heads and be comfortable and have food and all of these things. So we also are imagining that we're giving them all mundane happiness and all of the super mundane happiness, the contaminated happiness, but we're really, really recognizing that we're focusing on the uncontaminated happiness. But when we're thinking about giving sentient beings happiness, you know, if someone has a specific type of suffering that we want to relieve at that moment, and it's just something specific within cyclic existence, we can also think about giving them that, and that's love, wanting beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. We know that ultimately the happiness is a happiness that doesn't end, a happiness that isn't a suffering of change, right? So this is the happiness that we ultimately want to give them. But when we're thinking of their happiness, we can think of it in all different ways. And it's important to do so because then that makes it more real for us, because we know what it feels like to be able to fill your stomach when you're hungry, for somebody who needs that, who's somebody who doesn't have food. But we don't necessarily know what this happiness of not having suffering altogether would be like, because we aren't there ourselves. We have suffering of change, suffering of suffering, and pervasive compounded suffering. So the relatability isn't as strong. So we always want to do things that will make relatability, that will make us change the way that we interact with sentient beings in the here and now, and not not stay somewhere off on another planet and then be so awful and rude to sentient beings that it just doesn't even make sense, and we don't even seem like a Dharma practitioner. We really, really need to be doing things tangibly within our minds that we can relate to, and the things that we're aspiring to, so that we can eventually really, really integrate these things at a mass level. And we need to first start at a very small level. We start, with our, in our house, and then we move to our neighbors, and then we move to our city, and then we move to our state, and then we move to our country, and then we move to the world, right? And then we move to all world systems. But the sentient beings that we have to interact with and do the acid test on ourselves with, and do the trials on with, are the ones that are around us in the here and now. They aren't in outer space on Pluto. So we have to use them in our meditation, and we have to use them in our daily life to see how we're reacting to them, how we're doing in the supermarket when, someone, has one thing, we have 10 things. We're in a rush, but it's really not going to change anything if we let that person go ahead of us. How willing are we to put somebody's needs before our own? How willing are we to give them our happiness? This is how we check whether these meditations are working or not, whether we are willing in times when we just are feeling kind of selfish, to release that selfishness a little bit and give, happiness to another sentient being. And those sentient beings, even though I say they don't live on Pluto, they may, but we don't know them. And the ones that are on Pluto aren't the ones that we're going to be able to do our trials with, that are, to see if this meditation is working. The trials we're doing on ourselves as we interact with humans, and see whether these meditations are working and changing our interactions with real human beings or not. So important. So when we're cultivating these things, we do it in this way. Then we move on to great compassion, a cultivation of compassion. So we have this affection for beings. We want them to have happiness. And then we start to kind of look deeper. Okay, if we want them to have happiness, what's going on with them, right? So there's a lot. You can also look at it where compassion then, brings about love. There's a lot of arguments about this, but the way you can do it like this is, oh, I really want them to have happiness. What's going on with them? And then what's going on with them, because if you've studied the Lam Rim very well, you've studied your suffering very well. So there's nothing that should be foreign to you if you've meditated on all the sufferings of cyclic existence. So if you've meditated on all the sufferings of cyclic existence, then you know exactly what you're trying to get them out of. So the object of observation of great compassion is living beings, all sentient beings of great compassion, all sentient beings who experience misery through any of the 3 types of suffering. Okay, so that's the object of observation of the compassion. The subjective aspects of the thinking. The mental consciousness thinking is the subjective aspects, but the object that mental consciousness is thinking about is, if it's great compassion, all sentient beings who have any among the 3 types of suffering. And we know it's among the 3 types of suffering because we know that all sentient beings don't have all 3 types of suffering at any given time, because beings in the higher realms, as they get higher and higher and higher, they shuck off some of these forms of suffering for the time being while they're there. Not forever. Usually if they're in the highest realm and they only have in the lower realms, where in the desire realm, we have all of the pleasantries of the various types of suffering, of suffering of change and pervasive compounded suffering. As you get higher and higher up, first you no longer have the suffering of suffering, and then you no longer have the suffering of change. But you still have pervasive compounded suffering, because you will have to be reborn again. Even if you're at the peak of cyclic existence and you're experiencing the peak things you could in samsara, it takes a lot of karma to stay there and to concentrate there. And eventually, that enormous amount of good karma wears out, And like an arrow being shot in the sky, it no longer has the power to go up. And generally speaking, it falls very, very quickly. And it's said that a being who's in these upper states then has to again be reborn, usually into the lower realms of cyclic existence. So even though they've been in the peak of cyclic existence and have experienced the peak of meditative absorption, they were not experiencing liberation. And if one isn't liberated and still has the afflictive obstructions, then he or she will be born again, and he or she has pervasive compounded suffering. So the object of one's compassion is a sentient being who has any among the three types of suffering: suffering of change, suffering of suffering, pervasive compounded suffering. So what is the mind thinking? What is the mental consciousness thinking? What's the subjective aspect thinking? First, it's thinking, just like in the love case, how nice it would be if sentient beings could be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So you start there. May my friends, neutrals, and enemies, how nice it would be if my friends, neutrals, and enemies were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Then you think, may they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May my friends, neutrals, and enemies be free from suffering and the causes of sufferings. And then you say, I will be part of the cause of them being free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Those friends, neutrals, and enemies. So here, you're building up your compassion more and more and more. Again, this is the section where it says that Kamalashila states that you need to use actual beings, not general aspects, if you want to get anywhere with this. So how do you cultivate it? This is where really, if you've meditated on the small scope or not, it will matter. If you haven't done extensive meditation on suffering in the small scope, and haven't done extensive meditation on suffering in the medium scope, about the origins and so forth, and the various types of suffering, then this particular meditation will not be possible. It will be fake. It won't have any real foundation, and it will not produce the result of bodhicitta. So you must absolutely have had this foundation of meditation on the small and medium scope and the general and specific sufferings that you find in those sections. Because if you haven't, it won't be possible. And it says it right here in the Lam Rim Chemo, the way to cultivate compassion is as follows. Consider how these living beings, your mother, experience general and specific sufferings after falling into cyclic existence. I explained these sufferings earlier. Period. So we think about as much suffering as we can in relation to sentient beings in order for us to say, oh, how nice it would be if they were free from suffering, the cause of suffering. May they be. I'm going to be part of that cause. It really takes this strong building up of understanding of what you're getting them out of that comes from this desire that's so strong that day and night you want to get out of it. This can't be cultivated without day and night you wanting to get out of cyclic existence because of the fear you have for the sufferings of cyclic existence that you found out about in the earlier parts of the Lam Rim. When you found out about the 6 realms of suffering, and you found out about the 8 types of suffering, and the 6 types of suffering, and the 3 types of suffering. We learn so much about suffering in the small scope. When we look at, death and impermanence, and then we look at where can you be reborn? Into the higher realms, into the lower realms. And then we learn about the various sufferings of the higher realms in the medium scope. We say that, just the lower realms of cyclic existence aren't the only place that stinks so badly. So in the small scope, we definitely want to emerge from the lower realms because we come so clear on what the hell hungry ghost and animal realm is like. We see the animal realm, we know the sufferings that they have to endure, and then we can very clearly meditate on the hell and hungry ghost realms if we have this frame of reference from the Lam Rim Chemo, from Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, from the sutras, from the authentic Indian commentaries, where we find all these descriptions of realms that have suffering that's so unbearable we can't even imagine it. And we have to know what those are to be able to ourselves, feel like, we have to get out of cyclic existence. This is so bad. All these 6 realms of cyclic existence have among the 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering. We have to get out. And then we take this desire, we have to get out, and we turn it towards sentient beings. And we start to use this knowledge about ourselves to then want them to get out as well. This knowledge of the things that we've had to endure and will have to endure if we don't do something about it. We recognize that we know what to do about it, right? We've been given some tools. We've been given some instructions about what to do about it. And all sentient beings haven't necessarily been given those instructions. So we don't want to take for granted that, these instructions are just out there. We see all these different types of beings that are suffering and know they don't have an answer. And this is what's driving us more and more and more to be saddened by the state that these beings we have so much affection and love for are in. We have to develop this intensity in our mind that recognizes it through this analysis that we've done about ourselves, this affection that we have for them, this love that we have for them. And then we say, oh my gosh, these beings that we love so much, that we have so much affection for, are in hell. Our hungry ghosts, our animals, our humans, our demigods and gods. We see in the human realm all the different sufferings that we have. But Bunko Rinpoche's text, talks about, just imagine the various animals. Think about the sufferings of the animal realms we can see. Think about animals being led to slaughter. Think about a sheep being led to slaughter, thrown on its back with its legs tied up. It knows something's terrible is about to happen. It's not that ignorant. It fears what's about to happen next. Animals sit in fear their whole life that they're going to be eaten by a bigger animal. They go around in fear the whole time. I need food. I need shelter. I'm going to be eaten by a bigger animal. And then suddenly this moment comes that they're bound and they're about to be killed and slaughtered. And these were our mothers. These are beings that took care of us and were so kind to us. And Bunko Rinpoche says we need to think about beings and their suffering in these very specific ways. And then think about those animals that are grazing out in the hill and that have that moment of peace. And they have no idea that they're about to be led to slaughter. Like all sentient beings have no idea they're about to be led to slaughter by their karma and their afflictions again and again and again and again. So we look at these sentient beings and we see them all as these sheep that are being led to slaughter by karma and the afflictions, by this grasping at true establishment that then causes us to think funny, that then causes afflictions to arise, and then causes contaminated karma, and then causes all of our suffering. So we recognize this and we think about this intensively, and we go over it and over it and over it and over it again. And we see that all sentient beings are being led around by this grasping at true establishment, and that we are being led around by this grasping at true establishment. So we start to think about this in a very, very, very clear way. And we get very specific about the various sufferings that animals have to endure. Think about the suffering that a worm would have to endure. Think about a worm popping its head out after a rainstorm to get a little bath. And the robin comes and grabs it and chops it in half. Think about that kind of suffering. We say these hell realms just sound so far and so distant, these crushing mountains, crushing beings, and beings being burned alive. But how many bugs, as Rinpoche is saying, there were only certain kinds of ants in Varanasi when it would get to be so hot, 115, 120 degrees, the pavement would start to cook bugs. And we say that a hell realm seems so unbelievable when right in India we can go and see the pavement cooking bugs. right? So we think about all of those various types of suffering and that beings have to endure, the things that we can see in front of our eyes and hear about with our ears. And then we can apply those to the other realms we can't see and say, oh, how much worse it could be. And if they're a God and they're experiencing all this happiness and wonderful state, and then all of a sudden, all of their flowers and garlands start to wilt and they start to smell a little bit. If you read about the God's realm when they're about to die, you'll see this is what happens when their karma starts to shake and not have enough power to leave them in that state of happiness that they thought was so permanent. So this wonderful God that was maybe even the universal monarch that had, so many servants below him or her, and now starts to smell. And so the flowers start to wilt and all the golden color of this God starts to fade and all the other gods start to move away. And even the servants can't stand the stench. And then this being who was so happy now experiences the suffering of change, now experiences the next step of the pervasive compounded suffering and is thrown into those lower realms. So we have to think about these beings generally and specifically as we did have to think about it for ourselves to want to definitely emerge. If we want to be the cause to get beings out of suffering, we have to know what the suffering is we want to get them out of. And if we can think of it in a very, very grand way, our compassion becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So when we're later doing the next kind of practice called equalizing, exchanging self with others, and we're doing a giving and taking practice, and we're taking on suffering, we have some very specific things that we know we're taking on. And they're the things, the sufferings that we thought about in the small and medium scope related to our own experience. So we need to not skimp on these meditations. Bodhicitta is not something that arises right out of nowhere. And just a little bit of a vague meditation on some of these parts will not allow for the arisal of this mind that's the door into the Mahayana, the door into our chances to become a Buddha, right? We can't become a Buddha without this door, without entering this door of the Mahayana. We can't have infinite happiness without entering this door. We can't help all sentient beings achieve freedom from suffering and infinite happiness if we don't go through this door. So we see how important it is. We see how profound it is. We see how rare bodhisattvas are. They're not just everywhere walking around, and it's because the causes for bodhicitta are so specific and have to be cultivated in such a specific way that most people don't have the attention span. Most people hear about such a wonderful mind and think it's such a great gem and do a little meditation now and then about it. And that's because these foundations of how great it is, why it's great, and what benefit it'll have for you to get and all sentient beings to get hasn't been understood clearly. Because if you truly, in an incontrovertible way, understood this gem of bodhicitta, day and night you would work towards getting it. There would be nothing else that you would do day and night if you were trying to seek this gem. This compassion, the greatest level of compassion, right? The highest level of infinite compassion is what the Buddha has. So this bodhicitta is the biggest level. This Buddha mind, this mind that aspires to Buddhahood for the sake of all beings, is this ultimate, this highest form of compassion that one could have. The greatest level of compassion would be bodhicitta, right? The greatest level of love would be bodhicitta. So we see that that's what we're trying to aim at. And if we're looking for the greatest level of anything, if you wanted to be the greatest baseball player, if you wanted to be the greatest scholar, anything, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of steps. And it takes using sentient beings as our kind of test cases to see how we're doing. Geshe Dorje Damdu said that, if we want to try to generate compassion, we need to have people test it to see whether we want them to be happy or not. If we want to say, oh, we want my friends, enemies, and neutrals to be happy, I want my friends, enemies, and neutrals to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. Well, we need to test that in our lives. And we don't test that on, people who are just nice to us. We have to use real life cases study, right? We have to use real life annoying folks to see if we want them to have happiness and be free from suffering. Those are the ones who are going to help us to learn patience, help us to learn love and compassion for all sentient beings. It's the difficult beings that will distinguish whether or not we've made the progress. And Geshe Dorji Damdu is saying, as I was just mentioning, that, if you wanted to be the greatest boxer in the world, you wouldn't have your mother, be your coach. She's too nice to you, she wouldn't punch you in the face hard enough. If you want to be the greatest boxer in the world, you need a coach that's going to be willing to put you through the suffering that's going to take, the punches that it's going to take in order for you to become the greatest boxer in the world. Likewise, if you want to be the greatest being in the world and you want to help every being that there is and all types of beings and the diversity of beings, you have to work with the most difficult ones to see if it's working or not, because all sentient beings means that all. There is no bias. There is no differentiation. And that is what differentiates the compassion of a Henianist and a Mahayanist. A Henianist can have immeasurable compassion because it's more than we can measure. An Arya being, a Henianist who's an Arya, who's a superior, has a compassion that we can't measure because they are superior beings. But they don't have great compassion because the object of observation isn't all sentient beings. It's a number we can't measure as ordinary beings, but it's not all sentient beings. So the Henianist object of observation for their love and compassion is not all sentient beings, but it can be immeasurable if they are an Arya. So that was a detailed point that we have to study more to understand. But a Hinayana can have immeasurable love and compassion if they are an Arya, but they can't have great compassion. Why? Because they don't have an object of observation, which is all sentient beings. They're missing some. Their mind's not big enough in order to apprehend all sentient beings. So that's points that we can get into later when we want to study it in more detail. But I think that we'll probably stop here. But I really, really encourage everyone to go back to the first volume of the Lam Rim. I know it's not as fancy and as fun to study as some of the other volumes, but when you're meditating and you've gotten, through all the different sufferings that you could think of in this world as a human and all the different sufferings as animals, if you had that extra information, if you had those 8 hot hells, and you could imagine a suffering of someone boiling alive, and you could imagine a suffering of someone, having to be, almost die, and then, be brought back to a full state, and then almost die, and then be brought back to a full state, and just have that happen over and over and over again. If you could think about that kind of suffering, imagine how much, bigger and bigger your mind could become, and how much stronger your desire to free them would become, because you know that your future is possibly that as well. You know that even if your mother now is, living in a mansion, driving a Rolls Royce, you know that that state of burning alive is a future potential state for her. So when you find this relatability to all realms of cyclic existence, you can relate the current realms to those realms and understand how it could get even worse, and understand how even though when you're at the peak of what seems to be the peak happiness, it can become the worst suffering. So it's so important to meditate on this so we have a very, very broad understanding of the sentient beings that we're wanting to be free, have freedom from suffering. So we'll end there. And anybody have any questions? Okay. So thank you everyone again for your patience. And I really, really appreciate that we have the opportunity a couple times a week to talk about the Dharma. talk about the Dharma that Khensur Geshe Wangdak taught us so cleanly and purely. I feel so fortunate to have spent so many years translating for Khensur Geshe Wangdak, over 1,000 teachings. I'm not saying that to brag. Whenever I say that, it astounds my mind to know how much information I was able to receive. And I'm so grateful that I had a mind that could retain just a little bit of it, enough of it, that I can share it with you and know that what I'm sharing with you is pure, and that I was asked to share it with you with Khensur Geshe Wangdak. And that just fills my heart so much because when I start to have doubts or wonder, like, oh, do I have the qualifications? I'm nowhere near where Khensur Rinpoche was, even when he was like a young man. When I start to have these doubts, I then have to remember that Rinpoche had this faith in me and, kept me as his translator, then kept me, teaching with him next to me when he wasn't saying anything in the final years of his life, and then asked me to continue teaching. And for that, I feel so, so blessed and so fortunate because, even if, the words that I say, could be made so much better by so many others. By me saying those words, it gets me closer to Buddhahood. And I truly believe this, and it allows my mind to mature more, to analyze this information more. And by doing so, I then will be able to really know what the best words to say, what those best words to say are. And it will be in dependence upon your kindness for showing up and coming to these teachings that I will arrive at that state. So I just want to say thank you so much. And let's do the 8 verses for training the mind. With the determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely dear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest amongst all and respectively hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions, I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings, as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. When others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse, slander, and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer victory to them. When the one whom I benefited with great hope unreasonably hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone, without exception, all help and happiness directly and indirectly, and respectively take upon myself all the harm and suffering of my mothers. I will learn to keep all these practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena as like an illusion, be released from the bondage of attachment. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. In all our lives, may we never be separated from Khensur Geshe Wangdak. May we meet with him or her in whatever emanation he or she chooses, whether it be in the emanation body or the enjoyment body, if we're able to see emptiness and we can meet with that enjoyment body. But maybe we create the virtue and the merit necessary to be able to keep that constant relationship with a holy being and all other holy beings. So thank you so much, everybody. And we will see you next time. All right. Take care. Have a great week. Please practice these teachings. Please put them into your life. Please make them a part of you. That's for the purpose of them is. Look at the end of the Lam Rim Chemo. Look at chapter 3 at the very end. You'll see a summary of the teachings. Look at those teachings and see that it says that all of these things are so necessary us to do if we want to get anywhere on the path and how they will help us and benefit us in our lives. So we'll see everyone Sunday, and thank you. And please apply these teachings to your daily life.